Chapter 787, Dorian's Warning. Jayaman Sparrow. Dorian felt the vessels on his forehead pulse when he heard that as he held his hands together, tensing up without realizing it. Situated in Pritz Harbor, he inevitably learned of the various news at sea, both actively and passively, knowing far more than the residents in Backland who relied on the newspapers. In recent months, he often heard from different channels of information about Jayaman Sparrow. From killing Steele Mavetti to severely injuring Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy to successfully hunting Admiral of Blood Center, all these stories were colored with mania. He left the sea and came to Backland. He hasn't changed his trait of craziness. Dorian held back the horror and wariness that subconsciously rose in his heart as he looked at his student and said in a deep voice, "It's best that you minimize your communication with that bounty hunter. He's bound to get into big trouble one day, and it wouldn't take long for that to happen. Teacher is indeed experienced and has great acumen. He instantly saw through Mr. World's intrinsic nature. Unfortunately, I'm already a member of the Tarot Club, so it's impossible not to communicate with him." Fors adjusted her state of mind and sincerely nodded. "Yes, teacher." Dorian composed himself and once again looked at his former student and current enemy, Lewis Ween. However, this traveler could no longer speak. He didn't even have an iota of spirituality left. After a few seconds of silence, Dorian leaned back slightly and looked at Fors. "You mentioned paying £10,000 for the job." He wasn't aware of Fors' financial situation, other than knowing that his student was a best-selling author who likely earned quite a bit from her royalties. Furthermore, she seemed to be doing quite well in the few Beyonder circles with transactions that rewarded handsomely. Therefore, it wasn't too surprising or unacceptable that she could save up £10,000. Fors fidgeted, feeling a slight guilty conscience as she said, "Is it too expensive?" She deliberately asked a question in order to hide the fact that she had mentioned a fake number, so as to show that she didn't have much experience in such matters. Dorian shook his head. "No, it's too cheap. It's so cheap that I suspect whether Jayaman Sparrow has other motives." As a member of the Abraham family, which had suffered numerous setbacks, he often maintained a relatively high level of wariness. In the professional terminology of various clubs and gatherings, that is called a membership fee. Fors lampooned as she frankly said, "There were other conditions, including everything on Lewis Ween's person belonging to him, as well as the requirement of me providing him help. Also, I promised that if he's in need of cash in the future, I will compensate him an additional £3,000. That's reasonable, but just barely." Dorian nodded gently and said, "Usually, assassinating Lewis Ween, who had the Aurora Order backing him, would cost at least £30,000. And if there are other situations, the price will be higher." Back then, Mr. World had used demigod powers recorded in Leymano's travels. He probably encountered something else, an Aurora Order saint. Having had an edifying experience exerted on her by the Tarot Club, Fors wasn't unfamiliar with the Aurora Order's structure. She didn't hide her frown as she said, "From the looks of it, it's indeed a little abnormal. Perhaps he's in desperate need of cash." Dorian thought and said, "Perhaps he cares more about Lewis Ween's Beyonder characteristic. To the Beyonders of other pathways, it can be forged into a rather useful mystical item as long as he finds a suitable artisan." Dorian paused for 2 seconds before adding, "There's no need to worry about that. Just stay away from him in the future." Perhaps he had long targeted Lewis Ween, and he was just using the information you provided to carry out the assassination while still getting an additional bonus. Dorian didn't continue on the topic, as he took out a fist-sized, pure crystal ball from his pocket. "It's made of star crystal, and it can effectively raise your astromancy." The light shone in from outside the window as resplendent waves surfaced within the crystal ball. Without waiting for Fors to reject, Dorian chuckled. "Lewis Ween is my enemy. The payment used to get rid of him should be paid by me. I don't have that much cash at the moment, and I can only use some items to deduct from the payment." "No, there's no need." Fors shook her head, partially genuine, but partially in contradiction to her will. It was genuine because she only wanted to seek revenge for her teacher back, when she thought of getting rid of Louis Ween without considering the possible rewards she could later receive. It was in contradiction to her will because she couldn't reject the reward. Dorian said with a stern expression, "Do you wish for me to be ashamed and uneasy?" "Don't worry, I still have quite a bit of wealth." Fors nodded in response. "All right then." Dorian smiled once again. "Also, I've brought you the scribe potion formula. You can gather the corresponding ingredients as you digest the astrologer potion." "Heh, I'll prepare one of the main ingredients for you, the brain of an Asman. You'll have to rely on yourself for the rest." An Asman was said to be a monster that existed in ancient times. It looked like an unprotected human brain that could fill a room. Not only could it create terrifying illusions, but it could also make its attackers die from their own attacks. As he spoke, Dorian took out a yellowish-brown goatskin and passed it to Fors. Fors received it in gratitude and quickly scanned the list of main ingredients. One complete brain of an Asman, cursed artifact of an ancient wraith. "I hope I can gather the remaining ingredients before I finish digesting the astrologer potion." Just as Fors rolled up the goatskin, she saw Dorian take out a pure golden box from his suitcase. After removing the wall of spirituality, Dorian opened the box as he said, "Without the gold enclosing it, the brain of an Asman will constantly affect you, causing you to hallucinate until you lose your mental facilities." Inside the squarish box was a blob of grayish-white, translucent, and wrinkled object. It was about a fifth the size of Louis Ween's head. As expected of a family with a long history. Fors sincerely thanked him once again and received the golden box and skillfully closed it, and used a wall of spirituality to seal it. Dorian didn't stop and instead gave an excuse for Fors to stay back. He set up a ritual and summoned the void creature Malmuth, who enjoyed music. He then took out 2 documents from the creature's spherical body. He had prepared the 3 items for Fors when he received the shocking news regarding Mr. Dor. Therefore, he had it on him. These are 2 pieces of property in Backland. One of them is in Hillston Borough, and the other is in Sherwood Borough. They're in excellent locations and should have a total valuation of about £6,500. The amount you can sell them for will be yours, Dorian said with a smile. Although the Abraham family was in a state of decline, as a former angel family with a long history, it still had quite a bit of resources, including land, tree farms, property, manors, and mines. However, Dorian only had control over a few, with most of the remainder belonging to the various smaller families. "The place I'm renting costs £2,500 and in an okay district, but an average location. What teacher gave me today does add up to about £10,000. Fors couldn't help but sigh inwardly. In the Holy Wind Cathedral, deep blue efficient Randall Valentinus looked at the mandated Punisher deacon and said, "Any findings?" The new Backland archbishop was a middle-aged man with a domineering demeanor. His dark blue hair was thick, and he had large earlobes. His eyes seemed to constantly hide lightning and storms within them. The mandated Punisher deacon standing before his desk was a thin, middle-aged man wearing a modified captain's hat. His looks didn't stand out, but there was an anchor tattoo on his neck. The man answered reverently, "Your Eminence, we've already caught some of the members who participated in the gathering. However, they have no idea who the rest are, much less know of the person who assassinated Mr. X. According to their description, the assailant was about 1.6 meters tall and likely female. We can't rule out the possibility that it's a short man." Randall held back his anger and asked, "What do you plan on doing next?" "As we are temporarily unable to know who Mr. X invited to the gathering, and 1.6-meter tall women are common, our plan is to relax our stance on the surface as we target a few suspicious targets and convert those we've caught into informants. Without us exerting any danger, those bunch of lunatics from the Aurora Order will definitely seek out the murderer themselves in order to avenge Mr. X. They'll likely do a carpet search. And this way, not only will we find the assassin, but we can also discover more clues to the Aurora Order," the thin, middle-aged man explained in detail. Randall nodded in thought and said, "Roy, when taking action, remember to apply for a Grade 1 sealed artifact." the situation is clear that the Aurora Order has at least a saint in Backland. And the assassin's strength is greater than the typical sequence 5B yonder, and they similarly have a demigod backing them. Yes, Your Eminence. Roy Wellesley struck the left side of his chest with his right fist. Dwayne, you often exceed my expectations. It hasn't taken you long to finish studying the revelation of Evernight's Book of Wisdom. Inside St. Samuel Cathedral, Bishop Electra closed the Bible in his hands and smiled at the pious tycoon with gray sideburns and deep blue eyes. Klein laughed and replied, "This is expected of a believer." Next up is the study of the letters of the saints. "Yes, which saint do you wish to begin with?" Electra asked. Klein looked to his sides and chuckled. "Let's do St. Samuel then." Electra wasn't surprised at that as he seriously introduced. St. Samuel was a Backland archbishop during the fourth epoch of the Trunsost Empire. He contributed greatly to the spreading of the goddess's faith and entered her divine kingdom before dying, becoming an angel. As he spoke, he flipped to the corresponding letters of the saints. At this moment, Klein's spiritual perception was triggered. He felt a deep sense of evil and diabolical will spread above him. Following that, a cold and quiet feeling extended from underground, leveling everything and restoring the cathedral to its former tranquility. Bishop Electra snapped out of his daze and said to Dwayne Dance, who didn't seem to detect anything, "Sorry, I just recalled something."